Alright, so we need to start our look here at the urinary system as our last system of the semester. So the urinary system is divided into several fairly simple organs. We have the kidney, which is the most complicated one, the bladder, the ureter, and the urethra. Just to give you an idea of the blood supply to this particular region, because blood is very much involved with the urinary system. We get about 20% of the body's blood supply every minute. So this is one that is, this particular system has a lot of blood vessels in it that are involved because that's what it's doing, is actually filtering the blood. It is capable of cleaning our entire body's blood supply in about 30 minutes. So it's pretty efficient too. Now, uremia. If the system is not functioning properly, we cause something called uremia. And uremia is where we get the metabolic waste that happens from our cells that we need to remove. And unfortunately what happens is it builds up to toxic levels in the blood, and that can actually get us very, very sick. So if we look at the generalized organization of the system, okay, the urinary system is made up of the bladder, whose primary function is to hold the urine. The urethra is the tube that runs from the bladder to the outside of the body. The kidney filters blood to produce urine and also regulates the substances. And the ureters carry urine from the kidney to the bladder. So in terms of the overall functions of the system, we have producing and excreting urine from the body. It's going to regulate the amount of substances like calcium, sodium, potassium, chlorine, and bicarbonate. And this is very important for nerve signal transmission. And it's going to regulate the balance between water and salt content. It also eliminates nitrogenous waste and other waste products from the blood. Nitrogenous waste is left over from the different proteins that we have broken down and used, or maybe we have enzymes that we've had to break down because they're no longer functioning. It helps to regulate the blood volume and blood pressure, and it also helps to regulate our blood pH. Now, what we want to do is take a little bit closer look at these structures, and we are going to start with the major one, which is the kidney. The kidney, on the outside, has a renal capsule, and this is a fibrous membrane that actually covers the kidney. Underneath the capsule is the renal cortex, and it's almost like the white fleshy part of like an orange rind. So the capsule would be kind of the layer of orange, and then the thicker layer underneath would be the cortex portion. The renal medulla is the inner portion of the kidney that contains a special structure that is called the medullary pyramid. These are triangular cone-shaped divisions within the medulla where urine formation happens. The inner tip that's pointing like towards the center of the kidney is called the renal papilla. In between the medullary pyramids, we have a renal column. And then towards the center of the kidney itself, we have a renal pelvis. So this is basically where the urine is going to collect from the entire kidney before it passes into the ureter. Now, working between the renal pelvis and the medullary pyramids, the pelvis actually subdivides and becomes something called a calyx. Basically, this is where the medullary pyramids empty their urine into before it reaches the pelvis itself. And within the kidney, we have the nephron. And this is the kind of the microscopic part of the kidney. It is the major unit of the kidney that actually produces our urine. So if I take a look at the nephron, it can be divided into two major parts. We have the renal corpuscle, which itself is made up of a structure called the glomerulus, which is a high-pressure capillary network that serves to filter the blood. And then its surrounding wall that encloses it, which is called the Bowman's capsule. The other portion of the nephron is referred to as the renal tubule, and it is made up of 4 tubes that are divided into, or a tube that's divided into 4 segments. We have the proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting tubule. And the order in which those are listed will take you from the renal corpuscle all the way to the end. So this is the path that the urine travels through the tubular network. So let's take a look here at some of these structures. The first one is the proximal convoluted tubule. This is the first segment of the renal tubule, and it's functioning to reabsorb things like organic nutrients, water, and certain ions. The second portion of the renal tubule is the loop of Henle, and this is a sharp bend in the tubule, and you will see that it actually goes down and then comes back up. So it's got 2 sections. You've got the descending limb, where the urine travels inward towards the center of the kidney, towards the renal pelvis, and the ascending limb, where the urine returns back out towards the outside of the kidney, towards the cortex. The difference between these two is there's actually pressure difference, and that pressure difference is important for reabsorbing certain water as well as salt or sodium and chlorine ions. After the loop of Henle comes the distal convoluted tubule, and this is where we get secretion, so in other words pushing from the blood into the urine of ions, certain acids, as well as drugs and toxins that we want to get out of the blood and into the urine. These are substances that weren't necessarily pushed into the urine during the filtration process. We also reabsorb water as well as sodium ions based on our hormone levels and what our body needs to retain. So this is where the most reabsorption takes place. The urine then travels into the collecting duct, and the collecting duct removes the fluid from many nephrons, and you'll be able to see that on the diagram. But within the collecting duct, we still are making some final adjustments to the urine. We're going to make any final reabsorptions of water, and depending on our body and our electrolyte balance, we are going to secrete into there or reabsorb sodium, potassium, hydrogen, as well as bicarbonate. Now this collecting duct is going to merge with other ducts to form a larger papillary duct, and then the papillary duct is actually going to merge to form what we call a minor calyx and then a major calyx to get to the renal pelvis. And you'll see a lot of this will be a lot more clear when you actually look at the diagram. All right, so let's look at the other parts of the system to kind of finish off our introduction to the urinary system. We have the ureters. These are long, narrow tubes that have an expanded upper end as they attach inside of the kidney, and they are lined with a mucous membrane. They drain the urine from the renal pelvis down to the bladder, and the urine moves down through the tube through a combination of both gravity and peristalsis. It's not true peristalsis, but it's very close, so that's why I call it a peristaltic type movement. They are wave-like, but it's not the same. We don't have 2 sets of muscles like we did in the esophagus. So these wave-like muscular contractions move the urine towards the bladder. The next one then is the bladder in the system. This is an elastic muscular organ that is capable of great expansion. This is mostly made up of that transitional epithelium that's capable of stretching and then returning to its shape. Along the inside wall, we have folds called rugae, which actually allow that expansion of the bladder. In addition, we have this kind of triangular shape at the back side of the bladder that's free of rugae, and that's called the trigone. We believe that it's this area that, when it's stretched, actually triggers our stretch reflex. The bladder itself can hold between 300 and 400 milliliters of urine, So, think about a half of a liter, so to speak. And then the muscle contractions of the bladder actually cause urination. I'm sorry, the relaxation of those sphincter muscles actually cause urination. Sorry, I was thinking muscle contractions of the bladder. And that urination process is actually called micturition. Renal colic is pain that we will experience due to kidney stones. Basically, when the urine becomes very highly concentrated, in other words, if it's very dark yellow in color, you run the risk of kidney stones. You also run the risk if you're dehydrated, and certain other genetic factors will contribute to this as well. But what a kidney stone is instead of forming liquid urine, you actually get this crystal that forms. We kind of talked about this with gallstones earlier in the digestive system. But what happens is, again, you've got very sensitive tissue inside of the kidney. So this can actually affect your kidney, it can affect your ureter, it can affect your bladder. And these can be very, very painful. A lot of times, people just let them pass, which is fine depending on the size, but sometimes they are so large that you actually have to have ultrasounds done to kind of try to break up the stones to not only relieve the pain, but make them easier to pass out of the body. The last part of our system that we want to look at is the urethra. And this is the narrow tube that leads from our body to the exterior to release the urine. In males, the urethra has a dual function. It not only expels urine, but it also merges with the ducts of the reproductive system to eject semen as well. The actual opening to the exterior of the body is referred to as the urinary meatus. Now, what we're going to do in the next section is actually go through this process of how urine is formed, and we will also take a look at the process of micturition, and we will look at our diagrams as well.